everyone. This is Patterson, and I am here with Hancock Park's Virtual Experiences Discovery Stories. So all month long, we have been learning about maple sugaring. So if you've been watching our Wednesday and Friday program, then you've had a chance to see a little bit about how maple sugaring works when you're actually out there in the field. Well, I have a fun book to read today called Bear Goes Sugaring. So let's go ahead and find out a little bit more about the maple sugaring process. The winter has been long and cold, and while the temperature is still below freezing at night, it's now above freezing during the day. The sun is shining, and the spring is on its way. It's sugaring time. Time for Bear to make maple syrup. Now, as we've learned, maple sugaring time happens starting right around mid-February all the way to early March. That's when the nights are cold, but the days are warm. Now first, Bear needs to gather her tapping supplies. She needs a drill. She's using a hand-powered drill, but you could use a power drill in addition. You also need a bit. A bit is what goes on the end of the drill to dig right in. Now, these are the spouts. If you've been watching our Wednesday programs, you know that we need our spouts. So the Native Americans used to use, and the pioneers used to use the wooden spouts, but here in modern times, we now use the steel spouts. Then you also need your aluminum or plastic buckets. Now, maple syrup is made from the sap of a sugar maple tree. It can be difficult to identify in the winter when there aren't any leaves on the trees. But Bear planned ahead and marked her sugar maples with tape right around in the fall. So you can tell that it is a sugar maple tree because it has the yellowish, orangish, pinkish leaves in the fall, but in the summer they are bright green. Now, the sugar maples that you want to tap need to be about 30 years old. You don't want to tap young trees because they are still growing. Now, there's other types of maple trees where Bear can also tap. You can tap things like red maple and silver maple and Norway maple also. Right? But they just don't have as much sugar as the sugar maple trees. Now, Bear has found her sugar maples. She begins tapping by drilling straight into the tree, about 2 feet above the ground. You can see as she taps right in, she taps right into the tree bark, right inside here, past the bark, into the little tube system inside the trees. After drilling, Bear places a spout in the hole and taps it lightly with a hammer until it's firmly in place. She is careful not to hit too hard, because then she could crack the wood, or too light, which might not hold the weight of the bucket. See how there's a little hook on the spout? Make sure the hook is there before you tap it in. Finally, Bear hangs a bucket from the spout and puts a cover on the top to keep the leaves, bark, insects, and rain and snow from falling in. Now, wait a minute. Bear notices that there's a hole in one of the buckets. Well, luckily for Bear, just about anything can safely hold liquid food that can hold sap. Bear digs it out an empty plastic milk jar out of the recycling bin. He cleans it and cuts a hole right near the top. Then she hangs it on the spout, just like a bucket. Ta-da! And the sap starts to drip. Ding, ding, ding. All summer long, leaves make food for the tree in terms of sugar. The leaves fall in the autumn, and the sugar is stored inside the limbs, the trunk, and the roots. The tree then rests all winter long. Spring comes, and freezing nights cause gases. And sap in the tree starts to shrink. This pulls the water through the roots. The water mixes with the stored sugar to form sap. The next day, as the temperature rises above freezing, the gases and the sap expand and build up pressure inside the tree, like air in a bicycle tire. Tapping the tree is like slowly letting the little air out of the tire. Only instead of air, it's sap. And it's being caught in the bucket. So, at cold nights, it freezes. Warm days, it pushes on up. Now, turning the watery maple sap into sweet maple syrup involves one main thing: evaporation. When a pot of water is boiling on a stove, the hot water turns from water liquid into steam. The water evaporates, and soon there is nothing left in the pot. Now, the same thing happens for sap, only when the water turns into steam, it leaves the sugar behind. If you boil off enough water, you're left with a thick, sugary syrup. Since maple sap is only 2 or 3% sugar, it takes a lot of boiling to get rid of enough water. If Bear starts with about 40 gallons of sap, she'll have to boil off 39 gallons of water to be left with 1 gallon of maple syrup. It takes a lot of sap to turn it into syrup. To do this quickly, Bear needs an evaporator, which is simply a shallow pan with an intense source of heat. Here's how she built it. Bear stacks cement blocks in a U shape with an old stovepipe at the end to act like a chimney. In a pinch, she could skip the chimney and simply leave an end open. The chimney helps to channel the heat and smoke out so that the water stays there. Then she places a large, flat, shallow pan over the cement blocks. This will hold the sap. Bear doesn't use a pan that anyone will miss. Last of all, Bear stacks some wood nearby. It's from a fallen tree that she cut and split last summer. She also stacks downed branches that she's been collecting. It'll all be needed to keep the fire burning in the pan for an entire day. So she starts it, and she's got to keep it boiling and boiling and boiling to get rid of all that water. All week, Bear collects her buckets of sap and pours them into covered, food-safe buckets in a cool, shady place. Once she has her 40 or 50 gallons, it's now time to boil. Early one morning, Bear will fill the evaporator pans with the sap, and then she makes the fire underneath with some old newspapers and twigs and some of the logs. She adds more and more logs to get a nice hot fire going. And with the sap warming over the fire, steam starts to rise. And that's maple syrup being made. As the water evaporates, Bear adds more and more fresh sap so the pan doesn't empty and burn. But instead of adding the buckets all at once, she props up a can with a hole in it so that it drains in slowly. Bear uses a kitchen strainer to skim off the top. Some of that she just tosses in the snow. Bear spends all day tending the fire, and she adds sap and skims the foam until her buckets of sap are empty and the maple syrup is almost done. It's a very, very busy day, isn't it? Bear checks to see if she has the syrup from the old-fashioned way. She dips a spatula into the boiling sap and pulls it out. If the sap comes off and drips, it's not ready. If it slides off in large sheets or aprons, it's now syrup. Once the syrup begins to apron, Bear puts the fire out with a shovel full of snow. If she wanted, she could stop right there, but she wants to make sure the syrup is perfect. With the fire now out, Bear carefully, and I mean carefully, ladles the pan of hot syrup into a coffee filter and into a large pot. It looks like she does have about a gallon. And Bear takes the pot of syrup into the house to finish it up. See what she's going to do. Inside, on the kitchen stove, Bear brings the syrup back up to a boil. This time she uses a candy thermometer to tell her temperature. When it reaches 219 degrees Fahrenheit, she officially has made maple syrup. At this stage, Bear is watching for boilovers, where the syrup suddenly starts to bubble out of the pot into a hot, sticky mess. When she sees it happening, she simply flicks in a few drops of cream, and down it goes again. Look, the syrup is 219 degrees Fahrenheit. Bear turns off the stove and ladles the finished maple syrup into perfectly clean canning jars. And of course, she sets a small glass aside to cool so she can taste. It's a gift from the trees. Delicious! All that hard work was worth it. And before the sugaring season is out, Bear will have enough pure maple syrup to last all spring, summer, fall, and even into the next winter. And look who wants to help join. Pancakes! So, making maple syrup. That is so exciting. Now, you might think that maple syrup is something that is happens all over the country. It doesn't. We are actually one of the few areas that can make maple syrup. So, join us again for the rest of the month, where you can learn some more about the maple sugaring process. Again, on Wednesdays, join us out at the McKinnis house to learn a little bit about the pioneer maple syrup time. And then join us on Fridays to learn a little bit more about the nature part of it. So this one is called Bear Goes a Sugaring. And join us for Hancock Park's virtual experiences Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 1 o'clock. Bye, everybody.